So that was a really great video from Nordstrom, and you can see how much they accomplished in the course of a week. And that's really like the idea behind a design sprint, right? Which I mentioned earlier is 5 days. They went in, they had an idea, they swarmed on it as a cross functional team. They got their ideas in front of people and learned and kept iterating and refining and getting a prototype and building on that prototype to have something accomplished by the end of the week. So really, really great work there. I'm not sure if the Sunglass app ever made it to the mainstream, but it was something that I'm thankful Nordstrom shared their process on. So as I've been reflecting on how really great teams work these days, I think it comes down to these three mindsets. And for design thinking is part of it, embracing that uncertainty, figuring out we'll get through it together, we'll be a cross-functional team, we're going to explore the problem, and we're going to explore it from all these different angles and come at it from different lenses to see what we can create. Lean is really around minimizing waste and really building the right things. So how do we build, measure, learn as quickly as we can, go through these feedback loops and build the right things. And then Agile is really about trying to build things right. There's a lot of practices and rituals that have been highly effective for teams to use. And I hope one of the things you've learned in the course of this class is it's not a prescription. There's not one single thing that's a silver bullet that if you do stand-ups, you're going to be this amazing team. It's really this combination of things that makes teams great. And I think one of the things I've come to learn in my most recent team that's really critical is creating a sense of trust amongst each other and really trusting each other to do their best, to be your best, to bring your best self to work. When there's a lot of trust within the team will naturally feel empowered to work together and want to collaborate. So just the other day, I had some of my teammates finally say, "Oh my gosh, I understand pairing now. I can't imagine not doing this. This is amazing. I work so much faster. I create such better quality." But it took a lot of us going through this pairing and this stuff together. And with that foundation of lots of collaboration and high trust within the team, that they finally saw it. They witnessed it, and it took time. It wasn't something that they just did overnight. They were like, "Oh, Nicole and her crazy like love of pairing," but they finally have seen it, and it just warmed my heart that they said, "Oh my God, I can't imagine going back to the old way of working. This new way is so powerful, and I feel so great." Um, so really, it's this mindset of design thinking, lean, and agile together is really quite powerful, coupled with having a great team, trusting everyone. One of my team norms these days, and it's our number one team norm, is to simply be yourself, and that has led us to really create that foundation of trust. And so one of the things I shared with my team early on was like, I swear a lot and I'm sorry, but just know that that's me, and they accept it. And each one of us sort of has one of those things about us, but we understand each other from a human perspective, and we are truly bringing our best selves to work. So just to touch into what's maybe coming in the future of user experience, we can think back. I mean, these days, I've been around for 20 years. So one of the relics I found in my house the other day was this Adobe Illustrator 8.0. Back when software came in boxes, and the system requirements were Windows 95 or Windows NT 4.0. For those of us who were around then, that was a while ago. So you think of software these days and it's come so far. Everything's mobile, things are in the cloud, things are connected, are highly collaborative. As now most of us are working from home, all of a sudden we're using these tools that allow multiple peoples to be in it at once, whether that's creating a story map in Miro or in Trello, organizing cards, or in Jira. Figma is a design tool that allows multiple designers to be in the same file at once. So that's certainly where we've accelerated that growth. Um, and we've probably been in the mobile land for the last, decade. But what we're looking forward to is a lot of AI, machine learning, things with no interfaces, a lot of sensing and sensors. And like I said, sort of no UI. What happens with blockchains and virtual reality and chatbots? You're getting experiences delivered to you through Alexa, like someone's talking to you. So as a designer, that becomes even more challenging as I have to create these experiences and really think through all those details for when there's actually no screen to rely on. So that is going to come, and that's going to continue to accelerate. And I think we're actually, like I mentioned earlier, in a really innovative time, despite the crisis that's happening at the moment, or maybe because of the crisis at the moment. This innovation is going to continue to accelerate. So from a screen design perspective, I will just go back to say that um, when you sort of take away all your styles from your screens, is it still easy to understand? Is it still clear and tell a cohesive story? Oftentimes it's, I try to work in black and white just to make sure that I'm not being dazzled or distracted by colors, because I want to make sure things are really strong, whether that's the words I use or the layouts that are used. Um, and then what I hope you take away is, you know, everyone's a designer. We're all in this together. We can design anything. You can apply it to process, you can apply it to screens. If you find you hate meetings, well, like, why not take that design thinking approach and say, well, how might we design them differently? How might they be better? How can we adapt? What would make them valuable, right? Stepping back to ask that is all part of the design process. Um, And at the end of the day, you want your app or your system or your service to be great, but that extends to all points. So my story about the flight in the beginning, right? It's all those touch points. It's your employees, it's your customer service, it's the mail or emails that you might send. If any one of those points isn't great, that's going to stop your users from coming back. It's going to detract from your brand. So think about all those touch points. The devil truly is in the details, but the details are what can really make things remarkable and distinguished. So again, at the end of the day, while I might have user experience in my title, it's the whole team's responsibility to deliver a great experience, to deliver a great product, to deliver a great service. We all just come at it from slightly different angles, from an engineering perspective, from a project management perspective, from a business perspective, from a design or people person uh, perspective, right? But all of us together are in it together to create a great experience. So one last thing I think I'll leave you with is that oftentimes teams want this like great experiences to just happen and to happen really quickly. And so the story of the Disney Magic Band is a really good example of the investment it takes to make great design. It takes time. So for those of you who might not know what the Disney Magic Bands are, I have found when I do this class in person that there's a handful of people who know what they are, and then more often than not, I find out people don't know. So I'm going to say what they are. But these Disney Magic Bands are bands that you wear when you go to the theme park, and they have they're connected to your account so that you can simply go up and wave your wrist and be let into the park, be let into a ride, to pay for a Coke at the lunch stand, to get a fast pass. It's your hotel room key, and it's all tied to your credit card. So when you check in, it's like they know you're there, and then when you check out, it's all tied to your, like I said, your credit card at the end of the day. Um, so it's really quite magical. And what Disney did in ultimately creating these is Disney asked themselves, how can we make our parks and our experience of coming to Disney World even better, even more magical? It's the most magical place on earth, right? How do we make it even more magical? How can we remove friction within our park? How do we make it that much better. And so what they ended up doing is they formed a very small cross-functional team to start, but over time that team did grow. And they put that team right on Main Street at Disney World, behind the facades of these buildings. And this team got started looking into and observing people and understanding the flow of people within the park to try to create something that would be more magical. So that process to create ultimately the magic bands took them years to do. It took over 1,000 people to do, and it took $1 billion of investment in research. But probably one of the biggest outcomes of the project was, one, customers truly felt it was more magical. And two, in a sheer brilliance for a business perspective, is that by reducing the transactions per the credit card to once a day versus like every time the credit card was used in the park, saved Disney so much money on credit card transaction fees that it essentially paid for this project. There's a fantastic article that goes into more detail in Wired on it, that I highly recommend going through. Um, but it's a really great example of a team coming together to creating some really wonderful things, and using this process and using that design thinking approach to say, how might we make it even more magical? And so I mentioned this earlier. This is just a last bit on experiments. The faster you can have that learning loop, the faster you can learn and course correct. So oftentimes we will start with a hypothesis. We want to have definite ways we can measure that hypothesis, and then we start to test it with people. And sometimes, like early on, you might not need to get statistical significance. Just getting a pulse is enough to get you to the next sort of experiment that you do. And time box these things. You could wait forever for all this data to come in, but it might not be realistic. And like I said, oftentimes early days the experiments might be really short and brief, and then as you move along, you might have experiments that are going while you're in production that still allow you to learn, but you might run them for longer than a day or longer than a week. Maybe in some particular industries, you may have to have long feedback loops in order to get enough data. And I can think of things that are more regulated, like healthcare, might be one of those spaces where your experiment, while ideally you'd want to get it small, but the reality is you might have to run it a little longer. So like I said, everyone's a designer. You have an influence on making a great product, a great service. And really, once you start to use design thinking, you'll find that you use it sort of in all areas of your life. And I think that is the end of my user experience and design thinking sections. Like I said, they do sort of like flow together. But now I will let you put any questions you've got. Maybe you've had some and you've been adding to the Q&A in the app as we go, but we will answer some questions.